This is the tutorial for Chapter 4, Section 3, Part 1. And so what we're going to be taking a look at today are parallel lines cut by a transversal. And so we know lines are parallel when we see this symbol right here. So when you see this symbol, this arrow right here, and another arrow along another line that appears to be parallel, those are parallel lines. And then a transversal is just a line that cuts through a line, and so since we're cutting through parallel lines, we've got certain rules that apply to those different angles that are formed. So we're going to look at some congruency theorems, and one congruency theorem is vertical line or vertical angles. And so vertical angles are these. So if you draw any kind of two lines being intersecting at one point and make a cross or an X, and the angles that are vertical to one another are congruent. So this angle here and this angle right here, those are congruent. So if I call A and this angle B, I could say A is congruent to angle B. And so this little congruency theorem just means equal. And so it's just a similar word they use. Congruent means that two angles or two lines are congruent. In this case, we're talking about angles, so that's what that represents. And so another set of congruent angles would be these two right here. So we have this angle right here. I'll put 2 marks through it to show that it's different than the mark with 1. And these are congruent as well. They're vertical angles because they are opposite one another, and they only share this point in common. So if I call this one C and this one D, those two would be congruent as well. So C is congruent to D. And alternate interior angles. This is when we're talking about parallel lines with the transversal cutting through. Alternate interior angles are these. So this angle right here is congruent to this angle. So they call it alternate because they're on alternate sides of the transversal. They call it interior because they are inside the parallel lines. And so alternate interior. So if I call this one A and this one B here, I would say A is congruent to B, and the reasoning is that they are alternate interior angles, as long as we have parallel lines, as long as those two lines are parallel. So we're taking a look at some other angles. This one right here is, oops, not that one, let's erase that part, that's going to be an outside angle called an exterior. This one right here is inside the parallel lines, I'll call that one C, and this one's D, it's also inside, and these two are going to be congruent angles as well. And the reason they're congruent is because they are alternate interior angles, as long as we have parallel lines. So those are alternate interior, alternate side of the transversal inside the parallel lines. So again, we've got parallel lines because we've got this symbol here, and we're taking a look at now alternate exterior angles. So exterior means outside the parallel lines. And so when we talk about those, we're talking about this angle here and this angle right here. These are alternate exterior angles. So if I call that one A and this one B, I would say A is congruent to B, and the reason is they're alternate exterior angles. One other set right here, it would be this one right here, is an exterior angle, and then on the opposite side of that line, the alternate side of that transversal, but also an exterior angle, it would be this one, D we'll call it. But look at those two angles, and they appear to be the same, and they are, because the lines are parallel. So C is congruent to D because they are parallel lines and they're alternate exterior ones. Well, corresponding angles are also congruent as long as, again, we have parallel lines. So let's take a look at corresponding. Corresponding means same location with respect to the transversal. So same location with respect to transversal. And so that's the phrase I'll use when I'm talking about this, about corresponding angles. So let's take a look at this angle right here, A, and this angle here, B. See, they're on the same side of the transversal, same location with respect to the transversal, but just on the other parallel line. See how B and A appear to be the same? Well, those are called corresponding angles, and they are congruent as long as we're dealing with parallel lines. So A and B are corresponding. We've got some other ones here, so let's go ahead and write those down as well. And we've got this one right here. I'm going to call this one C, and then this one D right here. And those are also corresponding. See how they're on the bottom side of the parallel lines, but on the same side of the transversal. So C and D are congruent as well. We got some other ones, so let's take a look at those. We've got this one right here. We'll call this one E, and this one F right here. See how they're on the same side of the transversal, and they're in the same location too. They're above the parallel line that they represent. So E and F are also congruent. And one more set, so we'll call this one right here. So this one we'll call EF, so we'll go with G this time. This one right here below the parallel line, but on the right side of the transversal. Same thing here, below the parallel line, the right side of the transversal. So G and F are also congruent. So we're going to use these theorems to help us solve some problems. So let's take a look at the first one we'll end up seeing. So over here in this next one, let's go ahead and make this a little bit bigger here. Oops, quite a lot bigger. So we've got our problem. There it is. There we have it. So we've got our problem that says we want to find each unknown and state the reasoning. So we've got all these different angles we need to find, and we need to state the reasoning why we think it is the way it is. So one of the rules that we haven't talked about are supplementary angles. 45 and A are supplementary. So supplementary is when we have two angles add to make 180. So two angles sum to 180 degrees. We're going to use that rule for this first one. So we're going to subtract 180 minus 45, and when I do that I end up with 135. So that's going to be A. And so I'll say A equals 135, and the reasoning is that we have supplementary to angle, or to the given, we'll say, to given. And then we'll go on to the next one. We've got C. So C is going to be 45 degrees, and the reason that's 45 is because we have vertical angles. So there's a symbol for angle I'll use to make the writing go a little quicker. And then B is going to be 135, and it's also 135 due to vertical angles, but it's vertical. I forgot the I in there, so let me get it in there. Vertical to, and then it's vertical to angle A. And here I will say that C is vertical to the given angle, which we were given as 45. And then we'll go on to D, and D is, we'll go with corresponding, and it is 45 degrees, and it corresponding to, and then it's corresponding to the given angle. So if you look right up here, 45 and D are on the same side of the transversal, both above the parallel line. And then we'll move on to E, and E is, we could say, supplementary to D, so we could say it is 135 degrees, and the reasoning is supplementary to angle D. So there's a couple ways we could have said that. I could have also said alternate interior angles to B, and that would have been another way to do it. And we'll go on to F. And I'll use the alternate exterior this time. So F is 135, and here's a couple different reasonings. We could have said vertical to E, but it is also alternate exterior. So I'll use that this time. Alternate exterior to angle A. So there's lots of ways we could represent what these different angles are, and these are just some of the ways, but as long as you're using the correct way, it will work. So G, we'll go with a different one this time. We'll say G is 45 degrees, which it is, but I'll say it's vertical to D. So vertical to angle D. So I could have said it is supplementary to F. I could have said it's alternate exterior to the given. or I could have even said it is corresponding to angle C. So lots of ways to represent these types of problems. So check out the next tutorial for number 6 and 7.